Hi, in today's lesson we're going to learn about reflexive pronouns, what they are and how to use them. This lesson will be in 3 parts. The first part will be for beginners. The second part will be for intermediate students and the final part will be for more advanced students. However, I would recommend that you watch the whole video, as that way you'll learn all there is to know about reflexive pronouns. Okay, so let's get started. So what are reflexive pronouns? Good question. Well, the reflexive pronouns are, in the singular, myself, yourself, himself, herself and itself. And in the plural, ourselves, yourselves and themselves. We use a reflexive pronoun as a direct object when the object is the same as the subject of the verb. So, for example, I am teaching myself to speak Spanish. So here, the object, myself, is the same as the subject of the verb, I. So we use I and myself. Or, be careful with those scissors. You might cut yourself. Here again, you can see the direct object, yourself, is the same as the subject of the verb, you. We can use a reflexive pronoun as a direct object with most transitive verbs. A transitive verb is one that only makes sense if it exerts an action on an object. A transitive verb needs to transfer its action to something or someone else, an object. In essence, transitive means to affect something else. These are the most common ones: amuse, blame, cut, dry, enjoy, help, hurt, introduce, kill, prepare, satisfy and teach. For example, don't blame yourself or enjoy yourselves. But remember, we do not use a reflexive pronoun after verbs which describe things people usually do for themselves. For example, she washed in hot water. People usually wash themselves, so we don't need a reflexive pronoun. Or, Sam dressed and got ready for the party. Again, people usually dress themselves, so we don't need a reflexive pronoun. We only use reflexive pronouns with these verbs for emphasis. Okay, so you could say, he dressed himself in spite of his injuries. It is usual to dress oneself, but here we use a reflexive pronoun because we want to emphasize that that wasn't an easy thing to do. He had injuries and yet he still was able to dress himself. So the reflexive pronoun adds emphasis. Or, she's old enough to wash herself. Again, it is usual to wash oneself, but here we're using a reflexive pronoun to emphasize her ability to be able to wash herself, even though she's not very old. Okay, so now moving on to intermediate level reflexive pronouns. We use reflexive pronouns as an indirect object when the indirect object is the same as the subject of the verb. For example, would you like to pour yourself some water? Here, the indirect object is yourself, and it's the same as the subject, you, so we use a reflexive pronoun. Or, we've brought ourselves something for lunch. Here, the indirect object is ourselves, and it's the same as the subject, we, so we use a reflexive pronoun. We also use reflexive pronouns as the object of a preposition when the object is, you've got it, the same as the subject of the verb. So, for example, you could say, they had to cook for themselves. Here we have the preposition for with the object, the reflexive pronoun. Here it is themselves, which is the same as the subject of the verb. Or, he was feeling very sorry for himself. Again, the preposition for is used with the object, the reflexive pronoun, himself, which is the same as the subject of the verb, he. But we use object pronouns and not reflexives after prepositions of place. So, for example, he had a big black bag beside him and not beside himself. And after with, when it means accompanied by. So, for instance, she had several friends with her and not herself. However, we use reflexive pronouns with the preposition by to show that someone did something without any help. For example, Ryan got dressed by himself. He got dressed without any help, by himself. Or, I cooked the whole meal by myself. This means I cooked the meal without any help, by myself. Or, we use them to show that someone was alone. For example, the old man lived by himself in an enormous house. Here the old man was alone in an enormous house. Or, the young girl walked to the shops by herself. She was alone when she walked to the shops. We also use reflexive pronouns to emphasize the person or thing we are referring to. So you could say, Whitney itself is quite a small town. So here we are emphasizing Whitney, the town, being quite small. It is added for emphasis, especially if we're talking about someone very famous. So, for example, you could say, Sir Elton John himself sang the final song. Here we're emphasizing that it was actually Sir Elton John, the famous singer, that sang the final song. It almost adds to how special that was. We often put reflexive pronouns at the end of the clause when we use them for emphasis. For example, you could say, I baked the cake myself. Again, using the reflexive pronoun myself is adding to emphasize that it is impressive that I baked the cake with no help on my own. Okay, so now moving on to the advanced and final section on reflexive pronouns. Some verbs change their meaning slightly when they have a reflexive pronoun as a direct object. Here are some examples. Would you like to help yourself to another drink? This means, would you like to take another drink? Or, I wish the children would behave themselves. Here, this means, I wish the children would behave well. She found herself lying by the side of the road. Here, this means that she was surprised when she realized that she was lying by the side of the road. Or, I saw myself as a famous actor. Here, this means I imagined that I was a famous actor. She applied herself to the job of mending the table. Here, this means that she worked hard, very hard, to mend the table. He busied himself in the kitchen. Here, this means that he worked busily in the kitchen. I had to content myself with a few pounds. Here, this means I had to be satisfied with only a few pounds. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you feel more confident now using reflexive pronouns. Remember to like this video if you found it useful, share it with your friends and colleagues learning English, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new English language videos. And remember to click the bell so you're notified each time a new video comes out. Okay, so take care and see you very soon. Bye-bye.